Okay, so my name's Shannon Duffy,
I'm Jessica Moreno.
and we are doing our project on the Italian economics, or the economy of Italy.
Okay, starting out with the country resources. The natural resources of Italy consist of coal, mercury, zinc, potash, marble, pumice, fluorspar, feldspar, pyrite, a lot of natural gases, fish, crude oil, and the terrain is mostly rugged and mountainous, some plains, coastal lowlands. A problem that Italy is facing right now is air pollution from industrial emissions such as sulfur dioxide um, and acid rain damaging lakes, industrial waste treatment and disposal facilities. Some of the agriculture that Italy is known for is fruits, vegetables, grapes, potatoes, sugar beets, soybeans, grains, olives, beef, dairy products, fish, things of that nature. Switching over to labor, there's 22.4 million in the labor force. The total population of Italy is 61,680,122. The main industry, the main industries in Italy consist of tourism, machinery, iron and steel, chemicals, food processing, textiles, motor vehicles, clothing, footwear, ceramics, and 67.8% of the workforce is in services. 28.3% is in the industry, and only 3.9 work in the agricultural field. Unemployment rate right now is 12.7%. That increased from 12.4 in 2013. Italy's main focus right now is to obviously decrease the unemployment rate, and their plan is to do that with a new government and reforms, which we will touch on later on in the presentation. Capital, it's noted there, the GDP is 2.171 trillion, and the inflation rate is 0.4. Public debt is at 134.6% of the GDP, and GDP is increasing due to household spending, and it's expected to stay weak because of the public debt. Manufacturing is set to improve to help increase the GDP. Reasons why it may not help or increase is because of the rising labor costs, a strong euro, tight credit, and risk of deflation. And the revenues that Italy is bringing in is 956.6 billion versus the expenditures, which are 1.014 trillion. Excuse me. The entrepreneurship. There's no real incentive right now in Italy because of how much debt the country is in, and the prime lending rate is 5.2, meaning that there are no loans to start out a business, or there's no real incentive, like I said, for anybody to start business right now because nobody's spending anything. And the total debt as of December 31st, 2013 is 2.6 trillion.
Okay, so just to touch on some major current events that are happening. This past weekend, there was a football game or a soccer game that it was actually the Italian National Cup, and there's a bunch of scandals that arose with the leagues. During the game, beforehand, the game was played between the Napoli team and the AS Roma team. A couple of the Napoli fans were standing outside the stadium waiting before the game, and they were at one of the stands, which happened to be owned by one of the AS Roma fans, and the AS Roma stand owner shot one of the Napoli fans in an altercation that they had, which scared the league and everybody in it. They didn't know whether or not they should go on with the game since this all happened right before the game started. So there was a meeting between Gennaro De Tomaso, who is the leader of the Ultras, which is the largest fan group for the Napoli team, and he met with Marek Hamsik, who is the captain of the Napoli team and also the police force. They all spoke, and apparently it stated that they were just speaking about the Napoli fan and just trying to make sure that Tommaso was just trying to see that he was okay. But there's allegations saying that he is one of the leaders of organized crime and that Tommaso was actually giving the okay on whether or not to go along with the game or not, because they figured that the crowds were going to start rioting and have all these different issues, which actually did happen. But it turns out they did go on with the game anyways, and when De Tommaso asked the crowd to kind of simmer down, they did, which just goes along with the corruption and everything behind, because he supposedly is linked with the organized crime there. They decided to not, if they had shut down the soccer game, that would have been very detrimental to the economy. It's such a huge game. They were getting so much revenue from it that it would have been an awful hit to them to shut down the game. So in order for them to not have to do that by his okay, that ended up helping their economy a little bit. But it did give them a little bit of bad publicity in the rest of the world's eyes because of the videos that were leaked. Another current event that had happened was recently just found out in 2014. In 2012, there were a couple fatal earthquakes that had happened in Italy. And recently they just found out that they uncovered this scandal that the government was trying to cover up. The oil companies were actually pushing water pressure down into the oil lines to try to squeeze as much oil out as they could, and it ended up causing these fatal earthquakes. And they were just saying that that was a natural disaster. Turns out it wasn't a natural disaster, that it was actually caused by these oil companies, and they had it covered up because they're gaining so much revenue from the oil that they were selling. So that was another thing. So the effects of that, it just goes along to show how corruption is covered to allow economic growth. They try to cover up these different scandals because it's actually helping the economy. Something else to touch on, the different macroeconomic goals that Italy has. Italy as a country is actually looking to expand their economy. Right now they're in a bit of a recession. The nominal GDP is at, as we said before, 2.171 trillion. The population is just above 60 million, almost to 61 million people, and of that, only 22.4 are in the workforce right now. And the total population that is below the poverty line, the absolute poverty line, which actually includes having an income of only, I believe it's 520 euros a month, which is barely anything to live on, is at 8% right now, which is also pretty high. Unemployment's also at 12.7%, as we said before, which is incredibly high, but it has increased from last year as well. So right now their goal is to expand the economy, try to get more people into the labor force, and try to decrease unemployment. The government itself is being completely reformed. They are implementing new officials, and they have a whole bunch of different reforms right now in order to try to gain more growth in the economy. For example, one of the programs that they're trying to offer, one of the reforms is they're going to offer a 10 million euro tax break or tax cut in one of the reforms to the people, to the workforce of the people that are making under a certain amount, in order for them to get a break so that they can start spending more money in the economy again, or to give it a little bit of a boost. Some areas of concern. A lot of people are thinking that the areas of concern are with the fiscal deficit. That is not the case with Italy right now. They're trying to just grow and expand their economy. They're not really worried about more so of the fiscal deficit. They don't really want to raise that as much. They're just trying to focus more on growing the economy as opposed to raising the fiscal deficit. Okay, so on to the monetary policy. Monetary policy is going to be run by the central bank, which in Italy is the Bank d'Italia. The Bank d'Italia has a monetary policy transmission mechanism in place, which in turn kind of regulates the economy. It's actually an open market operation in Italy. So they have, as we learned in class, they buy government securities to expand the economy or sell them in order to contract. So with that, the bank controls the different deposits and lending rates. They also control the households and firms' savings accounts, expenditure and investment decisions, as well as the economy as a whole in general, and the different price levels set up. And they do that all through this monetary policy transmission mechanism. And also they're trying to keep consumer prices of the euro area below but close to 2% over the medium term. And right there, you also see that there's a little chart that shows Italy's crashing money supply. That's a chart from 2004 to 2011, and it shows right before their recession there to show the different how drastic of a hit they took in their money supply. Therefore, they're trying to grow and expand their economy and trying to get those jobs back in place and be able to spend again. Here is a chart on the growth rate of the GDP from 2008 until 2014. They're actually starting to regrow their GDP again. We're at 0.1% as of now, whereas before, in 2009, we're at negative 3.5, which is pretty crazy. Here in the corner, we have a chart of the unemployment rate in Italy. That is a chart showing the percentage. So we're at an all-time high in unemployment in Italy, and that's one of the problems that they're trying to fix, like I said, with those reforms below about getting the different tax cuts put in and all the different reforms that they have written out. At the end of the link in one of our resources tab, I'll have a video set up for you to watch that was actually posted 2 or 3 days ago from one of the economists of Italy going over their entire plan for what and how they're trying to plan on recovering.
All right, going into trade, as it shows there, the revenue from exports that Italy gains is 483.3 billion. Excuse me, sorry. And their main exports, as I mentioned earlier, were just some of the agriculture, the fish, the shoes, things of that nature. And the foreign trade surplus rose from 2.6 billion from 400 million due to stronger exports. And I believe that was just a year.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still having the issues due to lack of competitiveness and due to stagnant productivity and a difficult business environment and rising labor costs. The revenue from imports is 469.7 billion, and the household spending is weak due to unemployment and other hardships such as the massive amounts of debt that everybody in Italy is in right now. Nobody is spending money because they don't have it.
Yeah, the public debt is at such an all-time high. Like we said before, it's at 134.6% of the GDP. So since there's such high public debt, nobody's spending as much as they should be. And it's really one of the biggest hardships that they're facing nowadays is the amount of debt that they have as a country. Just something else to touch on. The biggest country that Italy does trade with is actually Germany. And around the same time, they both hit that they had that economic crash or recession that they had hit. Italy actually does about 12.8% of its exports with Germany, which is the highest country that it does exports with. It also does about 15.7% of its imports with Germany. And as I said before in the video that I'm going to have you watch towards the end, they're kind of taking a bit of a lesson from Germany, Germany had a bunch of reforms that they were trying to implement in order to gain growth back in their economy. And Italy is trying to learn from that because Germany wasn't necessarily going along as strict with or implementing the reforms as strictly as they should have been. Whereas Italy is taking a lesson from Germany in that, and they're going to actually try to implement these reforms more strictly and actually follow the guidelines that they have set up for themselves in order to gain more growth in their economy.
All right, switching over to this. Excuse me for not labeling. This is our graph for actually a PPC, which I learned last semester, a production possibility curve. And this line signifies the agriculture in Italy and how it is decreasing because of the current climate changes. And this goes with our changing resource aspect of the video. The climate changes are affecting agriculture, which in turn are affecting crops, which affects Italy's exports, which affects their income from the exports, and also just the trading with other countries. And that is the end of our presentation.
Yeah, so just to touch last final comments, as I said before, right now Italy's still in their bit of a recession. They're trying to come out of it through all the different governmental reforms that they're trying to get in. They're trying to revamp their whole government, get a whole bunch of new officials in there, and set up all these different reforms in order to grow and expand the economy, in order to not have to raise the deficit. But yeah, that's our presentation. Thank you.